And we are so excited about the season. We brought in our quarterbacks here, Brady, Quinn, and Danny Kanell. We're going to go over some conference winners, take a look at some futures. So let's start in the SEC. You got Alabama as the favorite. They beat Georgia last season. Georgia went on to win the Natty. You're going with Alabama. How close would you be to picking Georgia, or is it just Alabama all the way?
Not close. In fact, I think actually the other team I would put into consideration for this is Texas A&M. We saw Texas A&M beat Alabama last season. That really talented recruiting class, regardless of how they got there, they're going to be there in College Station. It's a tough schedule there for Texas A&M when you really look at how it pans out. So A&M's the other team I'm keeping an eye on, at least in the SEC West for now. But looking at the SEC as in total, I just think Georgia lost too much in the draft defensively. I think if you're comparing Stetson Bennett, even with as much confidence and swagger he had in the national championship game, how well he played over the course of the season, not going to stack up next to Bryce Young. I think this is really the revenge tour to me, Danny, for Alabama this season. Alabama getting back on top. And I think throughout the college football playoff, they pretty much win every other year. So this will be about time for Alabama to win another one.
There's also a trend, Brady, too, is when they lose, when they're left out of the party, that's the time to take Alabama. They're heavily motivated. They're angry. They have that chip on their shoulder because other seasons, everybody's telling them how great they are. How are they going to be able to, they're picked number one to start the season. They're supposed to run the table, and they get a little bit cocky. But this team is as hungry as an Alabama team as I've seen in the last decade, and it has great leadership on it. 89% of the roster, according to our guy Bud Elliott with his 24/7 composite ranking, the blue chip ratio, it's stacked. And this is one of those things about the transfer portal where the rich get richer. Maybe they had some questions at receiver. They bring in Jermaine Burton. Question at running back, bring in Jahmyr Gibbs. Question on the defense side of the ball, bring in Eli Ricks. They have absolutely addressed any weaknesses that they might have had in a season when they went to the national championship and lost. This is Bama's league this year, and I'm with you. I think the gap is pretty significant between them and everybody else, and I think Georgia's in for a little bit more of a setback year. In fact, our win total 11, I kind of like the under on that one in a rebuild year. I don't know if that offense is going to be ready to carry the defense while they get up to speed with some of those younger players.
I'm with you on that. I think if you look at, too, Florida, for example, with Billy Napier and everything, they're going to kind of bringing, Florida back. No one's invested more into the coaching staff and building that out, the analytics department, everything else behind that, trying to bring Florida back around. But also, don't sleep on Kentucky. And when you think about what Stoops has done in Lexington, and Will Levis may be one of the best quarterbacks and the number one overall pick in next year's draft, don't sleep on Kentucky playing spoiler this year, too, within the SEC and potentially sneaking up on Georgia. So I think Georgia's got maybe a little more difficult path than people think this year and trying to rebuild what they won last year.
I think in Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft, he has Will Levis around 5 right now with Will Anderson going first.
He'll do one when he's number one.
Yeah,
He'll do one when he's number one.
It will be, maybe a couple. Let's head over to the Big Ten. Danny, look, I know you're bullish on Michigan. They won their first Big Ten title since 2004. They do have a favorable schedule. But are you going to go with them, or are we going back to the Buckeyes here?
I was torn on this one. I really did give Michigan a lot of consideration. I think people just writing them off and saying, oh, it's a rebuild them year for Michigan could be in for a surprise at the end of the year. In fact, I know it's a trendy pick around these parts with Josh Pate and Tom Fornelli, a couple others, putting both Michigan and Ohio State into the playoff. And I think that's a very real possibility. But as far as the Big Ten goes, I think there's a great chance both these teams are undefeated. And where is the game? It's at the Shoe. And, of course, that revenge factor that comes. I do think one of the things that I am not 100% certain about is that defense. I know they brought in a defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, to kind of address the issues they had. But last time I checked, the defensive coordinator doesn't make tackles. He's not the guy sacking the quarterback. He's not playing in the secondary. I do think it was a great hire, but I still want to see if this Ohio State defense, which has gotten pushed around the last couple of years by Oregon, by Michigan, they'll be challenged against Notre Dame too. Where are they physically? But this offense will make up for any issues on the defensive side of the ball. They can outscore anybody. They've got the best wide receiving core in the country. C.J. Stroud right up there with Bryce Young as the best quarterback in the country, and they got Travion Henderson in the backfield. This team is stacked on offense. It reminds me somewhat, I'm curious to know what Brady thinks, sort of that team for LSU that won in 2019 with Joe Burrow. All offense, that was their identity. The defense was good enough. It didn't have to be dominant like last year's Georgia team. I think this is the closest thing we've seen to that 2019 LSU team that we've seen in the last few years.
Potentially, no. I think you're on the right track there when you look at all the talent that they encompass. But the hard thing for me is just the defense and really the fit for Jim Knowles. You mentioned him now hiring him as defensive coordinator from Oklahoma State. He typically ran a 3-3-5 scheme. That's not what Ohio State recruits. They recruit 4-down players, DNs who are going to be taken at the top of the draft. And I'm curious how either he's going to change or the personnel's got to change to his scheme. But as you check out the schedule, for the Buckeyes, you've got Notre Dame to open the season, but you got them come to your house in primetime and Michigan to finish in your house. So, outside of going to Happy Valley, which we don't know when that game will be played at the moment, it's looking like potentially a noon game. You don't get the whiteout then, not as a fearsome place to go play. Wisconsin you get coming to your house, not having to go to Madison and deal with that. And we'll see what Michigan State is this year. So not the easiest schedule, but I'm with you. I think it's the Buckeyes. Very similar. We just talked about the SEC and Alabama. It's really the Buckeyes and everyone else. And it's their conference to lose at this point. And much like Alabama, I think with how things shook out last year in the Big Ten, this is a revenge tour for Ohio State. And I think it's also a critical year for Ryan Day as the head coach, because what happened at Michigan and Ann Arbor last year was there was a lack of physicality. And that was something that I don't know that anyone really questioned about Ohio State before. But once you saw what Michigan did to them, running the football down their throat, controlling the line of scrimmage on defense, you really started to question, wait a second, is this more of like a high-scoring kind of finesse team for the Buckeyes? Or is this the team that can still get it done in the trenches? So they've got a lot to answer for this season, and I think it's going to be one where they're going to go scorched earth in this entire Big Ten conference.
So we have a lot of revenge tours going on right now with Alabama and Ohio State. You could easily kind of throw Clemson into that. This has been, or last year I should say, a rebuilding year, even though they won 10 games here. So let's go to the ACC. But Brady, I'm going to start with you. We have a picture of one Brady Quinn, who has had a lot of trouble with this particular conference and going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. We found this. You said they were the best team in Florida.
Wow.
You've switched your pick how many times now?
Probably 4 today. I am torn. I am torn between Clemson and Miami. And obviously they play each other, so we're going to have a chance to see how that plays out, and it's in South Carolina. So, advantage there to Clemson. My concern really is the quarterback position. DJ Uyunglele didn't play great last season, and I'm concerned about what that would mean if there is going to be a switch at quarterback at some point during the year. Now, we've seen it before with Kelly Bryant to Trevor Lawrence, and Cade Klubnik is the quarterback who they would go to, highly touted out of the state of Texas, and he's very capable, I'm sure, of coming in and getting the job done. But you got to remember, too, Dabo Swinney's had a lot of staff changes. I mean, Brent Venables finally left to go take the head coaching job at Oklahoma. And so how does that play a portion of this, too? Is the defense going to be as dominant? Even though they're returning 7 starters on that side, and they're talented, we know that. Will they be as dominant? Will they be as good in-game? So a lot more concerns for me with Clemson. I'm going to go with the U. I don't feel great about it, but I think at the end of the day, I trust Tyler Van Dyke, the quarterback playing Miami, Mario Cristobal, what he's building there, and I think bringing back grit, a physicality, and toughness to that side with the talent and speed they already have. So as long as you can get through, and forget about the game in College Station. Look, they can lose that, and obviously they can still win the ACC.
That A&M game sticks out a little bit there.
The game that matters the most is November 19th at Clemson. If they can win that one, it's a clear path to me to winning the ACC. And so I think that you can do it. This isn't hype. We said that before. Is Miami back? It's all these teams back. This isn't hype. Mario Cristobal is real, and what he's building in Miami is real. And I think this is the year you're going to see people start to kind of turn their heads and go, okay, I think this is going to be fun to watch how that thing continues to build.
I don't know. Is it a thing? I know horns down is a thing, but I want to do this, like the U down. Like
you're going to get penalized, Danny. Like either way, like if they're just as soft, you're going to get penalized 15 yards.
That's right. The one thing I completely agree with Brady is that Mario Cristobal is building something. And I just don't know if this is a foundational year or you're just going to see something special. And they do have a special quarterback in Tyler Van Dyke, who I think is right up there with Devin Leary at NC State as the top quarterback in the conference. I'm concerned about the defensive side of the ball. And this is a program in the last decade has been pushed around in the ACC by the likes of North Carolina, Georgia Tech. When they used to run the option, they'd come in there and push them around. Now, Mario Cristobal brings some toughness, but I think it takes a little bit of time to get acclimated. And here's the thing about Clemson. I know there's a lot of critics, and they're predicting potentially the end of a dynasty there with Dabo Swinney. But I'm betting on Dabo. I'm betting on him staying in-house with this all-in family sort of mindset. And here's what's going to happen with the quarterback position. One of two things is going to happen. Either DJ Uyunglele is going to figure it out and he's going to play like he did against Notre Dame a couple years ago, or else they have an option. They're going to go to Cade Klubnik, and they're going to get better. Now, I'm not saying they're going to have a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, but last year the quarterback play was as bad. It was the worst quarterback play in the ACC and maybe in the entire country. It was ugly. You saw a quarterback who was a shell of himself. They didn't know what to do offensively except run the football and limit the exposure. They're going to open it up somewhat. Again, who the quarterback is and when they play Miami, I don't know, but it'll be better than it was last year. I think the defense will be better, getting Brian Brzee back off that injury from last season. I think you could see a little bit of a different mentality on the defense side of the ball, but the talent is still there. So I'm going to say Clemson right back on top of their perch atop the ACC.
So that game against Miami, November 19th.
Yeah.
Of course, we'll figure out a lot before then, but that will be very telling. Let's move on to the Big 12 here. You could argue it is Oklahoma's to lose here, but look, you're not entirely sure what you're getting with the Sooners there. Baylor won it last year. Some people even feel like TCU is being overlooked. Texas dealing with a lot of injuries. So, Danny, who are you going with to win the Big 12?
You brought it up, man. I think this is the most wide open Power 5 conference. If you wanted to try to take a flyer on a TCU or a team that's kind of in the middle of the pack, you get some longer odds. I would not push back at all. I just look at this Oklahoma program, and I see a team that I think is going to be better defensively with Brent Venables, who we were just talking about, coming in, having a more physical and mentally tougher team on the defensive side of the ball and a team as a whole. And I don't think you're going to see much drop-off on the offensive side of the ball. And that's more of a compliment to Jeff Lebby, the offensive coordinator, coming in from Ole Miss, where he lit it up there with Matt Corral. Before that, he was with Josh Heupel at UCF, lit it up with his quarterback, who he's bringing back in Dylan Gabriel to go with him. So I think this team is going to be high-powered. And if I look around the Big 12 and I say, all right, who do I trust the most? It's the team that rattled off 6 Big 12 conference championships before this past season. I think there's an infusion of freshness and an excitement around Brent Venables, and I think it translates to a Big 12 championship.
I was just going to say that's the thing that stands out to me is it's a different feel in Norman. Where obviously it was Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley since 1998, 1999. It had been forever since you didn't have someone who was hired from in-house. But even though Brent Venables comes from Clemson, he's been there previously, and he understands what it means to win at Oklahoma and what that culture is all about. So I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that he's going to bring that physicality, the toughness, everything we saw at Clemson defensively to Norman. But on top of that, you mentioned Jeff Lebby. Dylan Gabriel has been one of the more prolific passers that we haven't really given enough attention to because he wasn't playing in a Power 5 school. He is now, and he's going to be on the national stage to show everyone just how good this young man is. So even though, Texas is a trendy pick right now, they've announced Quinn Ewers will be the quarterback this year, and they can put up points. Can they play defense? I mean, that's the biggest concern. I actually think it's disrespectful that Baylor, who's the defending champs, has the 4th best odds to win the Big 12 right now. Are you kidding me? With what they have coming back and the way Dave Aranda's built this up, I mean, I'd sprinkle a little money on that if you want to hedge your bet. But I'm going to say it's Oklahoma. I mean, we tend to forget. It's just been 1 year removed from them really dominating this conference. And I think they're going to continue to do so moving forward. But Baylor's the other team you got to keep an eye on. I think that's the other team that could play spoiler in this whole thing.
Big 12 wide open. Pac-12 is a little interesting as well. So you have USC and Utah tied with odds plus 210. So for the most part what you're getting with Utah. They did lose Devin Lloyd. You have Cam Rising back. With USC, the individual pieces you have. You're not entirely sure how they're going to come together. Who are you going with to win the Pac-12?
Well, I'm going to go with USC, and really for this reason. I think you can make a case for Utah. There's no doubt about it. Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches in college football. He never gets enough credit. And he is also kind of a throwback where you look at how physical they play on defense. It's basically single high safety the entire time. Either post-high zone, post-high man. That's what you're going to get. They're going to stop the run. They're going to force you to beat them one-on-one on the outside. That's their game plan. And so the reality is that usually wins. But it's tough when you got to go up against some of the best in the country in all of college football. And that is Caleb Williams at quarterback for USC. He's going to be familiar with everything but the personnel there in Southern California. Jordan Addison, who is the best wide receiver in college football, coming back now to come back and play for USC. Mario Williams is going to be a big play threat. They've gone to a number of players in the transfer portal. It's going to work out. The biggest question is defensively, can they stop anyone?
Can they get off the field to bring that offense on?
Look, as bad as they were defensively last year, I don't think they're going to be as bad this year. And their toughest game is going to be in Salt Lake, no doubt about it. Then Notre Dame. But if we're just talking about purely for the conference, that's the test. October 15th. And they've got time to put this thing together and build it up until then. So with all the money, all the resources, everything they've put into it, if Southern Cal doesn't win the Pac-12, it's a gigantic disappointment.
Woo-wee! He's buying the hype. I like it. I'm cautiously optimistic on USC. Again, more one of those longer-term plays. I think they're going to start 6-0, and then I think the wheels come off a little bit. Some of the critics come out because they have to go to Utah. Then late, they have to go to UCLA, and then they got Notre Dame coming, who I think by that time is going to have a lot of, new, the freshness and the new guys they're breaking in. Quarterback, they'll have that figured out. I think they're a 3-loss team. I like Utah in the end. I think Kyle Whittingham is one of the most underrated coaches in all of college football. We saw last year how the offense opened up when Cam Rising took over. He's pretty special on that side of the ball. The one thing about them is they have an identity every single season. They are physical on both sides of the ball. Every time you talk about their front seven on the defensive side of the ball, they have a bunch of guys up front who are nasty, who play with a chip on their shoulder. The schedule's manageable. I think they go into Gainesville, get a win against the SEC in week 1. They've got USC coming to their place. I think the Utah ends top the Pac-12 when it's all said and done.
So a little chalk on our hands across the board on all these picks, but not too
It's
bad.
a little
Not too
shocking.
bad.
The thing I'm concerned by with Utah is the trip to Gainesville to start the season. How do you recover from that?
Hot.
It's going to be hot. They're training at altitude, so kind of evens itself out. The thing to me is, how do you recover if you don't win that game? A lot of times teams stumble early. They have a hard time kind of finding themselves again. They lose some of that swagger, some of that confidence. That's not going to be the situation, I don't think, for USC, even though, again, Stanford, they play early, could be a stumbling block there. Who knows? You always got to give Coach Shaw credit for the job he does there. That's my concern, though, I think, for Utah, is if they do stumble early, even though it's not in conference play, how do they recover from that? Can they get back the same swagger they're going to need for that matchup versus USC?
Either way, we've made it to this point. It is finally here, and that's what we're excited about. All right, let's recap their picks here. Do want to mention we did not get to the AAC. Both Danny and Brady going with Houston, though, to go ahead and win that. They only differ 2 different places. Brady's going back and forth between Miami and Clemson, ultimately going with Miami, his pick to win the ACC, and then differing when it comes to the Pac-12. Mr. Quinn going with USC, Mr. Kanell with Utah. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.